Jan, let me open up the metaphorical barn door. What type of responsibilities do we have in sales and pre-sales?
Big question, Tim. Big question. So I would say managing customers, compiling quotes, engaging all the stakeholders, discovering their needs, build value proposition, and of course, build and present the solution.
Yeah, indeed. So I think we can all agree this is quite a lot of stuff that we have to take care of. And with the increased focus on value and the recognition that, of course, sales is a team sport, as we discussed many times on this podcast, organizations also have realized the need to have a dedicated role.
Yeah, so we decided to bring, again, a guest into the mix and talk to us about value engineering.
Sales Excellence is your podcast for software B2B sales and pre-sales. My name is Tim, and I'm a solution consultant at Exactly.
And I'm Jan. I'm a pre-sales leader at SAP. And with that, welcome to a new episode of the Sales Excellence podcast. So I would like to welcome Ricarda Rieser. Welcome to the show. Great to have you.
Thanks for having me on the show.
It's our pleasure. So let me quickly introduce Ricarda to the audience. So you studied management, philosophy, and economics, and then you joined the SAP Academy program, which is, as we both know, a very great training program dedicated, in your case, to sales engineering. And after that, you started as a value advisor and also a value engineering trainer. So today, as Tim already mentioned, we would like to talk about that role, and we would especially talk about why that role can add value to an organization, to the customers of an organization, and to the whole sales cycle. So let's get started with the role a little bit. If you look at the role as a value engineer, what are the most common activities you have in your daily business?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Let me start with saying that value engineer might sound a bit weird. I always tell our customers that I'm not an engineer. I didn't study engineering, and it has nothing to do with engineering. I'm focused on the value side, and the engineering part is because we're trying to somehow find out what the value is with our customers. And I say somehow because there are many different methods, and I will get to that later. And we then also bring that value to life, either with workshops or calculation in many different ways. And what we're basically doing is we're initiating discussions with our customers, which are focused on the value side of our products and not on the cost side. A lot of times, customers are mainly looking on the cost side, and that's the only number they see. And that's what they take for granted because they don't have any other guidance on what to look for. So what we do is we want to work with the customer to develop a justification for the technology investment decision. And we're doing this by aligning our solution and business outcomes to the customer's strategy and thereby building the case for change. And to get a bit more specific, what we exactly do is we identify the value possibilities and map out compelling drivers for a business transformation so that we can give some sort of strategic guidance for our customers and ultimately support them in their business process performance improvement.
So really kind of changing the perspective, how people looking at the business and doing an investment, right? So I'm in a pre-sales manager role. Tim is a solution consultant, as they call it at Exactly. So if you look at these different roles, like the solution consultant or the pre-sales person and the value engineer or value advisor, what is the difference from your perspective?
So first of all, let me start with saying that there is a difference, but I don't want to highlight the difference too much because in our daily business, we work very close together, and sometimes the roles even get a bit blurred. But to try to find a difference, let me explain it in this way, that a pre-sales specialist is mainly focused on a line of business or a solution, whereas I'm, as a value engineer, I'm more focused on an industry. So let's say we have an HR pre-sales expert, and this expert would present the HR solution and benefits to a variety of customers from different industries, such as healthcare, professional service, or discrete manufacturing. I, as a value engineer, I am working exclusively with customers from the discrete manufacturing industry, and I'm not only focusing on the HR solution, but on all kinds of solutions. So whatever solution the customer is interested in, I'm going to help the customer with it. And for me, in the discrete manufacturing industry, that's typically a supply chain or manufacturing solution. And that's because the way a discrete manufacturer produces his or her products is different from, let's say, a chemicals company, right? And that's why we focus in the industry, because we need the industry and process knowledge in order to help our customers in the best way possible. And we want to focus on the end-to-end process, and therefore we have to know the industry. But what's most important when we talk about pre-sales and value engineering is that we're not working in some sort of bubble or silo, but always close together. So before a demo or a presentation, I like to align with the pre-sales colleague in order to map out what the benefits are, that we have one common direction and specifically tackling that customer in an aligned way, right? And I've even showed some demos at one time because I worked so close with a pre-sales colleague that we mapped out the story together and then role-played the demo together. So it gets blurry at some times.
Yeah, got that. And I mean, maybe that also depends on the kind of organization you are working in, right? So within SAP, huge organization, a lot of different industry sections and all these things. Maybe at smaller companies, kind of different model if it comes to the role of a value advisor. So let's step into the organization a little bit, right? So in your case, what are the interfaces you have within the organization from your role?
Mm-hmm. So as already said, we're working industry focused. So I'm in the customer advisory team of the discrete manufacturing industry. And likewise, we have this team for any other industry. And within this organization, the customer advisory, we have pre-sales colleagues, business development colleagues, and value engineering colleagues. So for sure, we all engage on a daily basis. And then, of course, we have the sales executives that we engage with. And what I think is very interesting is that I sometimes work with development or solution owners. And that's when we are mapping out solution-specific benefits when there are new solutions, for example. And I think that's super interesting because you can get really into a new solution and you talk to the owners and they give you a little bit more background on it.
So what about the customer?
Oh yeah, the customer for sure. So the customer I engage with on a daily basis, depending on what kind of engagement it is, for sure. But the customer is the most important part of it, of course.
I mean, to me, that sounds like a pretty wide role, right? So a lot of responsibilities, a lot of touch points, a lot of topics you need to put into consideration to get to that kind of value-driven view you will then hand over or present to the customer at the end of the day.
Yeah, definitely.
So if I would like to engage, right, with you as a value engineer to get your support, so how is that working, or how should that work? Are there any kind of prerequisites you put in place? Are there any rules of engagement?
Yeah, so let me first talk about an ideal world. So if it all runs smoothly and we're living in a perfect world, I would say engage with us as early as possible in a customer interaction. So early on in the sales cycle, because in that way, it gives us the opportunity to provide strategic advice, and it's best when we know the circumstances. Where's the customer coming from? What's their need and challenges? This helps us in drafting a very customer-specific value story and also work together with pre-sales so we can do a customer-centric presentation together. And at the end, we can bring all our knowledge together to then build a case for the customer. When I say case, I'm talking about the bigger picture, not only a business case, because that's a common misconception that people in our organization have, that we're only doing business cases. So a big chunk of our work is doing business cases, and they are very important, but that's not the only thing we're doing. So as I said, if we come in early on, we can draft the bigger picture, and the business case might be a part of it. So I said in the beginning, in an ideal world, in reality, we often come in when we talk about the business case. And usually that's pretty late in the sales cycle. So the functional decision has mostly been made, and you need some numbers to support the board or sponsors or stakeholders. Then we need to go back to the customer, ask, what are the benefits that you see with the solution? Why are these benefits? What are we taking into the business case? And this is all stuff that could have been done early on without me explicitly asking the customer, and incorporating this into a bigger story where business case is an important part, but just one part of it. So for me, the bigger picture includes the customer strategy, the challenges, a target picture, or maybe an architecture where the customer wants to go with the solution, a roadmap how the customer gets there, and of course, what business performance benefits it could bring to them. And this might be a business case, but it's a bigger story, with the business case being one part of it.
Yeah, so one thought comes to mind, and I absolutely understand what you're saying, Ricarda, when you say, okay, please engage us as early as possible. And in fact, I mean, in our organization where I work, we also have value engineering, and they say the same thing. Engage us early so we can get as much information as possible. So we don't want to be abused as sort of the ROI calculator of the organization. We have broader capabilities and skills that you can benefit from. On the other side, I can see, and this certainly has been the case at SAP, and I'm sure it's the same at Oracle and Microsoft and all these big corporate companies, where you go to a prospect and you speak to them, and then you come up with a whole bus of people, right? All of a sudden, 10 people are joining the meeting, and from the customer side, there's maybe only 3. And then the AE has to make the decision, okay, who do I really take to this meeting? Because it's going to be ridiculous if I involve everyone, right? Because I think not only value engineering is making that statement, I also heard these statements from like professional services, and maybe even from a support point of view, or maybe even product sometimes wants to join these type of conversations, and then you have to be very selective. So in my mind, I'm thinking, yes, it's great to engage early, but it's also a matter of transporting the information that I have already gathered during the sales cycle in an efficient way to the rest of the organization, right? If you would have an AE that comes to you and says, hey, Ricarda, I really need your help. I've been speaking to this customer already for 3 months, but here is a great set of information that I have learned about this prospect. That would be probably just as good. It's an open question to you. How do you see that point?
Definitely. If half of the information doesn't get lost in transition, for sure. I'm totally fine with that. A lot of times, because I totally get your point, you can't always get a whole bunch of SAP people with only 3 customers in one room. A lot of times we even take the role of shaping the engagement, right? So the AE brings us in very early, and then we are running all the workshops together with the pre-sales experts. At the end of the workshops, already writing down what the benefits are, and then going one step further into the value assessment, and then building maybe even an executive document. So a lot of times I actually ran the whole engagement from start to end, let's say so. And of course, the sales executive was there at the beginning, during some meetings, and at the end. But it was more up to me how I want to shape it and what pre-sales experts or other experts I want to bring in.
Right, and maybe that brings us slightly back to prerequisites, right? I mean, what I hear is definitely you need to develop the right mindset within the organization. You need to make yourself aware as an account executive, and I think also as a pre-sales person, that you have that role within your organization, right? And you need to understand what is that role capable of. And what you throw to the table, I think, is you can do a lot of stuff, right? You can add a lot of value to a deal, to an engagement. So that is point number 1. I would assume that you would need to have a certain threshold with your customer to be able to engage a value engineer. And then, as you said, there should be a kind of, I don't know, proven practice framework or whatever, how to engage, right? Early, we need to run these workshops, we need to have discovery, we need to ask these questions. So these kind of things. But I would assume that mindset is a very important one. As you said, a lot of people still think you guys creating a business case or just a business case.
Definitely, for sure. For me, it's not just a common sales role, but also more on the consulting side. So it has something of a consulting role, right? Because if we're engaged from the beginning on, we can understand the customer needs and we can talk to him or her on what's the right way to go. We can engage technical consultant or an architect, that can help with a roadmap, with the right implementation path. On a parallel track, we then have the pre-sales experts that talk more about the functional things. And then at the end, we bring it all together, right? So as you said, Jan, of course, we can't do this for any deal. There's a certain threshold, or if it's a strategic deal, that's somehow incorporated into a bigger deal, of course. But that's also the reason why we're trying to roll this out a bit more to the field. So internally, we're doing value engineering trainings for sales and pre-sales so that they get to know our methods and tools. And maybe for smaller deals, they can use some of them to bring that value aspect to the whole story.
So, Tim, you mentioned you also have the role of a value engineer at your company, and the company you're working for is slightly smaller than SAP, right? So,
just a tiny bit.
Just a tiny bit, yeah. So, how does value engineering looks at exactly?
Yeah, so I mean, we have around, what is it now? I think around 700, 800 employees in the company, obviously much more focused in what we're doing. But still, I feel it's a luxury that we have this role in our organization. So we have globally around 30 pre-sales people, and one of those is heading up basically our value engineering. And he came in, I think, around 2 years ago or so. So shout out to Michael Ketchmere if you're listening to this. Nice one. And it's extremely valuable for us. So he is basically saying the same thing as Ricarda: engage us early, right? Don't abuse me as an ROI calculator. I can provide much more. I can structure the engagement. Let me be a part of the way you engage with your customers, but it's the same way, right? We obviously cannot use him in any type of deal. We have to be a bit selective. But if you decide, okay, there is a very strong opportunity coming with a sizable amount of money to be earned potentially, then it's a good indicator that we should involve him.
Cool. So definitely a lot of similarity.
Yeah.
Independent from the size of the company.
Yeah, that's right.
And I mean, on that ROI calculator stuff, I believe there is an Excel sheet, right? he can send you, and then there you go, right? Put some numbers in and you have your ROI calculation. You don't need to occupy our valuable resources for that.
Yeah, that seems, I mean, that's the no-brainer, right? Map it out in an ROI calculation spreadsheet. And I mean, there's different versions of it, maybe customer facing, and then very sophisticated ones with like multiple tabs and very detailed parameters that you can fit in. What I've also recently learned, that there is actually software solutions out there that can really make it quite feasible to put this together, even without the need to go into any Excel formulas. And that is working quite well, because that can also be a customer-facing thing. So yeah, I'm looking forward to explore that more.
Cool, great stuff. So Ricarda, question. You mentioned the ideal scenario, and then you mentioned being the ROI monkey, right? So from your perspective, how much is your role already leveraged within the organization? To what extent?
I think the role itself is leveraged, but it's not leveraged to the full potential. That's more the matter of it. Sometimes, so getting back to the business case or the ROI calculation, sometimes that's all it takes, right? Sometimes the tipping point is just the calculation, and then the decision is yes, and that's fine. And I get that sometimes there's not more needed. But a lot of times I get into deals and I realize, hey, it's not about the business case, actually. There's more to it, but I'm too late in the sales cycle that I could start all over again, right? And that's what I mean. It's not leveraged to the full potential. We get asked a lot of times for help, but not in the matter that I explained earlier. And again, that's why we are trying to enable our organization internally to engage us early on, or for smaller deals, be able to use the ROI calculator by themselves.
Do you have a concrete example of this where you say, okay, the account executive came in and said, hey, Ricarda, I need a business case calculation. Then you went in and then you found out, okay, well, maybe a business case calculation is useful here, but actually it's more than that. Do you have something tangible that you can share with us?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, there are two examples. So I recently had one where the customer looked at the cost and that's it. And then the AE, account executive said, so let's have a business case. But the customer was already so set on the cost, he wouldn't even go there. He wouldn't even go down the road to discuss a business case with us. I explained our business case approach and I said, hey, let's look at the benefits. And he blocked because he said, no, it's too expensive. I'm not buying it. So there was no way for me to even get to him. And I think if we would have started talking before he saw the cost, we could have changed that perception. And then another example is for the bigger deals where there's more than just one solution, where it goes more into a digital transformation roadmap. Then obviously just talking about a business case is too narrow-minded. You have to open this up a bit further. You have to have workshops and you have to have an architect that's showing which way to go, right? And sometimes I came in and they already had these workshops. And then it gets a bit annoying because you have to go back to the customer and say, hey, what benefits did you see? And he's like, well, we already had these workshops. And I have to go to the pre-sales expert who's like, yeah, maybe this, maybe that. And you have to validate this again with the customer. And then it's a back and forth, which is more work for the customer and for us at the end.
Makes sense. So would your advice then be, on one hand, we need to do a little bit more education to the organization, but potentially also a little bit of kind of marketing for the role. So this is what the role is all about, and this is how to engage and these kind of things?
Yeah, for sure. I think with our internal enablements, we're already doing some sort of marketing. But a lot of times I talk to sales colleagues and I talk to them and say, hey, there's more that we can do than just a business case. Did you know? And I'm listing all the methods and tools that we have. And I'm like, whoa, I didn't know you did that. Maybe I should leverage you more often. So I've had this reaction a lot of times. So I think it's maybe crucial to educate both sales and pre-sales more about what value engineering can do. Because then we can also work closer with pre-sales. A lot of times, and I don't want to attack anyone, but I've had some presentations in pre-sales where people were just focused on their presentation they showed for 10 years, so to say. And I think we can tailor this more to the customer if we work closer together. Because if the pre-sales expert knows what I'm doing, I know what they are doing, we can just align our skills and then have a more customer-specific presentation talking about the benefits that really matter for the customer.
Ricarda, that can't be. Pre-sales people don't make any mistakes. I'm sorry.
Of course not.
Yeah, definitely not if the name is Tim. That's for sure. No, I hear you. And makes sense to me. So Tim already said something on that topic. What I'm interested in as well is, what is the level of appreciation you get for being a value advisor, for bringing all that cool stuff to the table, to the customers?
I think it's pretty much highly appreciated. Yeah, it is. Especially when it's found out that there's more to the story than just numbers, then even more so. And I think pre-sales and value engineering and sales, we're all on the same level, right? We have to work together with the customer to close the deal. So we should all mutually appreciate each other and work as collaboratively as possible.
Sales, pre-sales, value engineering, it's true love. It's like between Tim and myself. So
one team, one dream.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. And I mean, without joking, from my perspective, you're completely right. In these times, what we are doing with the expectations of our customers, we can only win as a team. 100% agreed. So let's dig a little bit into methods, processes, and even tools. So what are the kind of guiding principles you put into place when you start working as a value engineer at a deal?
So first, for me, it's important to set an engagement direction and manage expectations, both on the customer side and on our side. And then comes what we call the value discovery phase, so the justification to build the case. And we want to find out what are the biggest sources of frustration for the customer, how do those tie to the business challenges that they have, and what initiatives does the customer have internally already, and can we identify any more initiatives he or she can do. And by answering all these questions, we want to develop the case for the digital change, right? And after we've done so, we're going to go into the actual sales cycle and get closer to the value realization phase. So we're actually planning the path forward. We're visualizing the solution through a value-focused demonstration together with pre-sales. We are building a roadmap, a target picture. Ideally, we're going to do this all in a very collaborative way together with the customer. So what I like to do in bigger engagements, even have sure fixes with the customer where we work on maybe on a common PowerPoint or final document, right? And everybody puts work into this. So that at the end we have a document that we can present to stakeholders and sponsors. And as I said earlier, a business case might be part of this. And a lot of work goes into this. The creation of a business case, several workshops, several technical deep dives, all that stuff then goes into it to, at the end, have something that helps with the yes or no decision.
Cool. Which also means to me, if you create that engagement direction and you're working all together, so everyone will have hopefully the same common understanding of what is going on, and it doesn't feel like, okay, here is a vendor, here's a potential customer. It's more like, let's team up, right? So let's partner. Let's really bring the good stuff together.
Exactly, yeah. At the past, I had a lot of engagements actually where the customer had to internally justify why they want to go with us. And that was exactly the way we worked. We had an internal, let's say, project team and an external with the customer where we sat down in weekly meetings, and discussed where are we, what's your homework, what's our homework, what do we need to do to get there.
So if I listen, hear you talk the way you describe your typical engagements, it sounds there's quite a few things going on, right? It's rather comprehensive. And now I was thinking, okay, if I look at how typically such, in this case, an ROI calculation, for example, is being used, it's sometimes used a bit like offhand. Here's an Excel sheet. Here you can see the ROI, and then there's some percentages in there. But what you say makes much more sense to me to do like that, because the typical thing you will always hear from a customer when he looks at your ROI is that the assumptions that you've put in, they don't agree with them, right? You have to very carefully engage in the conversation with the prospect to see, do they actually agree on those assumptions? Because if they don't, then your whole ROI falls flat. And I suppose the level of depth that you go into these type of engagements, as you just described to us, is really necessary to get that buy-in, right?
Exactly, for sure. And then you even, during the workshops, you even get to know where are the pain points, where do they see the benefits, and you can even ask specific questions, right? And then maybe you don't even need assumptions, you can take customer statements in there. And if you have to talk about assumptions because you work together already on so much together, a customer also is more open to go down that road with you and discuss assumptions, or take some of our numbers and maybe tweak them, rather than just saying, hey, here's the business case, have fun with it.
Totally makes sense to me. So let's dig a little bit into tools and methods. I think we talked about ROI calculation and business case. So what else is there? What else you're using if you engage with customers?
So we have a broad variety of tools, and I'm just going to highlight a few that I think are the most valuable ones. There's one that's been developed by two of my team colleagues. They're very valued colleagues to me. And it's a great way to have the customer talk, and it's not your typical demo. So usually it's a whole day workshop. And at the beginning, we start with a little teaser. So we show a cool, innovative case, some sort of demo, but not a regular one, something really cool, innovative, but also something that relates to the customer. And not longer than 30 or 45 minutes, right? And after that, we take the most of the day to have the customer present their end-to-end process and really walk us through it. So we ask them, how does your process look like? what solutions do you use in that process? How do they integrate into other solutions or your big ERP system? Where are your pain points? Do you have any specific coding that's not standard? All that stuff. And before the workshop, we asked the customer to prepare this. And very important for us is to not have it in PowerPoint, but to rather have it on a flip chart, on a whiteboard, on Post-its, or even draw it out while they're talking, so that we can get back to the picture and really discuss where their pain points are. And during that workshop, we always have pre-sales experts with us that then discuss the best practices and the standardization and show how our standard process looks like, right? And occasionally the pre-sales colleague then goes into the system to visualize some ideas, but it's not about showing a demo. It's more about discussing best practices and pain points. And at the end of the day, we also talk to the customer about the benefits they would see in such a best practice approach. And we also prioritize the pain points. And without knowing, the customer has told me what I can take into the business case. Of course, later on, I'm going to align that again with the customer, but I don't need to do the double work and then go back and ask him, hey, what do you want to include in the business case? Because I already know by this workshop.
Right. One question on the innovative part of that workshop, right? So that kind of teaser, demo, sneak preview, however you would like to call it, is that something you are able to build because you have the deep industry knowledge? Or do you also have kind of upfront alignment with the customer to be able to walk in their shoes and make it relevant to them?
Yeah, it depends on also what the customer wants to see, right? So we have an alignment with the customer, and sometimes they say, hey, we want to see something innovative, cool that you do. Sometimes they have specific requirements, and sometimes they even say, just tell us what you did with other customers, right? So we get, like, not even from your industry sometimes, from a different industry, but they just want to get an idea of what others do.
Cool.
Yeah, so I feel already inspired to use more different types of medias doing that. Of course, now in our current situation, everything is quite remote. I've started using some whiteboarding digitally. That's quite nice. But I think a lot of this also really comes into play when you have actually on-site type of meetings where it's just more engaging to use a whiteboard and maybe flip charts and stuff like that. But yeah, using these type of media to do proper discovery, I'm a big fan.
And I know that. You're a big fan of discovery.
Indeed. I can't emphasize it enough.
All right. So what else?
Design thinking. I'm not sure if everybody knows design thinking. It's an approach to create solutions that are grounded in human needs and that leverage digital technologies to deliver business value, just in short. And I often use design thinking to identify suitable use cases with a customer. So use cases that they can realize when they implement our solution. And the advantage is that during that process, or during that workshop, I get to know the whole customer process because I have them map it out in that workshop. And then I also ask them where there are pain points, how they could be improved. We talk about realistic use cases, but also about dreamer use cases, something that if you live in a perfect world that could be implemented. We talk about critic use cases. So we really open up our minds and talk about different perspectives and angles to get then to a use case that's suitable for the customer and on which we can build the case then. And again, that helps with drafting the value story because without even asking the customers, they're going to start and talk about their problems and where they see pain points and what's working well for them or what not, because it's a very creative and open environment. And we try to have different team members in there. So let's say management, but also from the production, so that everyone gets together in one room and can really say what works and what doesn't work.
I pretty much like that idea because I participated in a couple of design thinking workshops, and my impression was really so you create a mood where people are really able to open up, right? So it's like think out of the box, getting creative, and not just talking about pure technology or stuff like that. So really, going a little bit deeper and using that kind of creativity process to get a very valuable result.
I mean, just on that point, without going too deep now into design thinking, I think it's almost worthwhile doing a dedicated episode on that topic because it has so many applications, right? And many of which in sales, as you just elaborated on, Ricarda. So it's a great tool that we should leverage probably more.
Yeah, agreed. So do you have a third one for us?
Yes, sure. The benchmarking, which I'm sure everybody knows about benchmarking. It's a good way to help organizations compare themselves to their peers, and thereby they can identify critical process maturity gaps. Or in another way, they can see where they're really good at and even become better. So it's some sort of competitive advantage towards their peers, right? And this performance measurement based on top of KPIs and best practices helps the customers to better understand their digital maturity and where they have to improve or further improve to even get better. And on top of these numbers, it's then not too much work anymore to build a business case at the end.
Makes sense to me. And I mean, is my assumption correct that not every tool and method is working with every customer? So you really need to figure out what is the right kind of tool or method to use, to leverage with a specific customer?
Yeah, it's more a mix and match approach. So you have this toolbox and then you take out of this toolbox what you need for the customer. Sometimes we take all of them, right? So sometimes we do design thinking first to even find out if there's a problem. And then if we know the problem and understand where we want to go, we can do a whole day workshop to go deeper into that problem space. And at the end, do then the business case. Or in other engagements, we started with the benchmarking to even find out if there are any gaps where the customer needs to improve, right? And then take this as a starting point to do workshops and business case at the end. So it's very different. It always depends on the customer situation and what they want to achieve.
I like that one. And with that, I would like to hand it over to Tim for a real-time conclusion.
Yeah, so firstly, thank you, Ricarda, for sharing those insights. I definitely have a couple of things noted down here that I hope also our listeners will appreciate as a quick conclusion to what you've given us here today. So firstly, I think one thing that I really liked you said in the beginning, yes, it's called value engineering, but it's really not an engineering job in the typical sense of the word. It's more like a metaphorical sense where you're not turning nuts and bolts, but it's rather identifying business drivers. And you also emphasized the fact that it's a very consultative approach, right? Yes, you are part of the sales organization, but it's a very consultative approach, a very collaborative approach together with your customer. And it's really about changing the perspective from cost-driven to value-driven. So what you also said is it's important to engage if you have value engineering in your organization, which is already a luxury, in my opinion, in the first place, engage them as early as possible, right? Not an afterthought where you say, okay, please now do the calculation for me. Because the very tangible example you gave is where the customer was already seeing the cost and it's too late, right? So that deal was done, even though you didn't even have a chance to talk about value. So build that trust and get that buy-in quite early is important. So as we emphasized, ROI calculation is one important activity, yes, but it's not the only one. Again, you mentioned that collaboration approach. You mentioned that you are quite workshop-driven, drafting the value story, using creativity tools and tools that can judge competitiveness of your prospect, which obviously then provides additional insight and value to them. You influence the actual engagement and, of course, then in the end, build the business justification based on the sources of frustrations, which is a nice term. I'm going to steal that from you because typically I say pain points, but I like that. So the last thing which I also find worthwhile noting is that next to the typical suspects that you would expect, like sales and pre-sales as your interfaces, you also said you have a link into product. And I think there's a lot of companies out there that are very much focusing on the technology and the great products they can build, but reflecting on, okay, what is really the value impact, of course, is the most fundamental success element, because if it's of no value, no one will buy it. So that's an interesting one. And lastly, I want to close off with, and this is also my observation, this function is extremely useful, can provide a lot of great insights for the customer and also provide, of course, for us as a selling organization, the value, but it's not as leveraged as it could be, right? So hopefully also with this conversation, we could make a contribution and raise the awareness that the role is out there. And if you, dear listener, have this role in your organization, definitely engage and network and see how you can use it for your own success.
Thank you, Tim, and especially huge thank you, Ricarda, to you. It was a real pleasure having you.
Thank you, likewise.
So everyone can reach you on LinkedIn, of course. We will put the link into the show notes. Yeah, for our listeners, I mean, it would be cool if you guys also follow us on LinkedIn and give us a good rating on Apple Podcasts if you like the episode. And with that, thank you, goodbye, see you next time.
Bye-bye.